Think we're live. Hello and welcome everybody to this ServiceLoop episode number in human AI collaboration in the age of large language models. And I'm joined today by Jochen Wulf, a PhD from the University of Zurich of Applied Sciences. Welcome, Jochen.
Thanks for having me, JT. Great to be here.
Great. As you might know, I'm Jean-Thomas Célette, JT, the CEO of Core Systems, hosting the ServiceLoop podcast. I'll ask you, Jochen, to also give us a quick introduction of you and your background, especially what you're doing in terms of research, as this will be the driver for today's episode.
Yeah, happy to do this. So I'm part of the Smart Service Engineering team at the Zurich University of Applied Sciences, and we are part of the Institute for Data Science in the School of Engineering. And so our main mission is to drive servitization in Swiss companies. By servitization, I mean the increased commercial use of services in contrast to, just a pure product-oriented logic. And mainly, we do applied research and development projects with Swiss companies. For example, currently we have a large project with 5 manufacturing companies where we develop intelligent circular services with use cases such as data-driven maintenance, service lifetime extension, or condition monitoring. Or a second example, we cooperate with a Swiss information service provider, and we develop solutions for automated data extraction with language models. So here, the idea is to complement the manual service portfolio with AI-driven services. So these projects mainly are funded by Swiss innovation agencies such as InnoSwiss. And of course, I also do teaching. I teach on master, bachelor, and also professional level, service innovation in engineering, service operations management, but also AI-related courses. So I just, for example, started a course on no-code development for AI workflows.
Cool. Sounds super interesting, and sounds like you're not only on the academic side of what we do at Core Systems, kind of on a day-to-day basis, but you also really dive into forefront client type engagements with industrial companies, and that's really cool because at the end of the day, everything we do it to put it in practice and somehow improve how the economy works. That's fantastic. When we did the pre-briefing, you gave me a funny anecdote. I think 3 years ago you actually tried outsourcing teaching to a large language model for your daughter. Is that right? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so of course, I mean, that's the first question we all ask ourselves when we see this solution and this really impressive increase of capability. What does it do our jobs? Can you outsource stuff? So, and as a parent, you're not just a professional teacher, but also an assistant teacher for your kid. So one of the first applications I try to implement is having an application where basically a story is dynamically developed for my daughter with her favorite characters, and then integrate into the story. I wanted to have math riddles, math questions, and she needed to solve the question in order to go on with the story. I knew that these models are not good in math, so I outsourced the math part. But at that time, 3 years ago, the models just weren't good enough to have good stories. So my daughter got bored very fast, and she still prefers me over the chatbot, which I guess is a good thing.
Okay, so we all safe. Our jobs as dads are safe for now. Fantastic, cool opener. Passing this on to businesses, because we do know that large language models are having a pretty radical impact on how businesses are run.
Yes.
What's your take from all your work, from all your research work, also on how LLMs and the agents behind it, etc., are affecting corporate business models?
Yes, I mean, from a broad view, I mean, we have looked at tons of different applications, and we see like an overall pattern where many companies first focus on the bottom line. So you think about where can you save costs. One of the main application areas, in my opinion, always is internal regs. So you have tons of information within your company. You try to increase accessibility, decrease the amount of time people are just searching for stuff. So this is what we often see. We often see the automation of simple back office tasks. You know, banks try to automate document processing, for example, for mortgage applications, or even the front office. Radisson Hotel Group, for example, they use language models to automatically handle cancellations via email, or they pre-formulate responses to guest reviews. So these kinds of applications is where companies usually start. More interesting, in my opinion, is when you think about customer-facing, service-oriented innovations. We see new channels coming up. You probably know the Helvetia Clara use case, where you use a chatbot to provide pre-sales information on your product or services, or even generate completely new services. Think about voice-based interaction, integrated, for example, by Mercedes into their car entertainment systems, or by in the Boston Dynamics robots. You now can talk to them.
Yeah.
So there's lots of very interesting developments when it comes to service innovation.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, you mentioned Boston Dynamics. We work with a lot of industrial companies. What's your take, especially for, you know, machinery, industrial automation, etc. companies? Well, how do you see them evolving, especially also knowing that very often they are rather conservative in terms of like technology adoption?
That's true. However, we see quite a broad spectrum of application there. For example, we worked with a large industrial manufacturer in Switzerland, and we saw use cases starting from using language models to speed up the tendering process, or generating standard operation procedures. So the whole automation of documentations is quite interesting. Or even strategic processes such as market intelligence. So basically collecting competitor or supply chain information. And when it comes to what you can achieve with this, we see different goals. You know, increasing efficiency. We talked about manual data processing, increasing service quality. So you can customize messages to your customers. I think that's very interesting. Then reactivity. Some workflows, business processes can just be faster. Then employee capability. So we talked about access to information, which is, I think, key. And interestingly, also, you can improve data quality with language models. Which I think is a very important aspect. We will come back to this later on.
Sounds great. And at the same time, we see, you know, there's also challenges that are probably preventing some of these companies from adopting large language models, AI, more widely. What do you see as the main challenges?
Well, coming back to the industrial company that we worked with, there it was mainly owing to how they managed their processes, and also the culture underneath. So they were quite risk averse and conservative. So they still need 100% proof process in order to outsource it to technology completely. So they always wanted to have a manual check at the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then cultural issues. There is fears about losing jobs, in my opinion, and people, are somewhat hesitant to share data or need motivation to contribute to developing these solutions. So this is something that you need to be aware of. And then we have the usual, data security concerns. How do you make sure that the data is safe that you share with these models and systems? And fragmented data, of course. How do you prepare the data in such a way that you have high quality output? So these are, I guess, the usual candidates, right?
Yeah, I think that makes sense, and that resonates. That resonates quite well. And when you think about it, two of them, I think we know from before, right? Making data privacy, data security issues. They've been there since forever. They've been accentuated with the cloud and with mobile and all that stuff. And change management has probably been, always the biggest problem in large IT transformations. But for sure, now we have this extra component in there, which is, is the result that the AI is giving me, is it actually trustworthy? Like, what's the and what likelihood of it being, correct can I attach to it? I think that's a new critical factor that we have to take into account when deploying AI systems.
True, and I guess we are quite experienced in handling probabilistic answers. But for a lot of enterprise applications, that's a completely new world.
Yeah.
They have rule-based workflows forever and forever. But now we need to handle probabilities. And that's just a new challenge, I would say.
Absolutely, yeah. I always use the example of when you need to put coolant into an engine, which is a very simple question you might ask a typical RAG type application. But if you get the wrong result here, you might cause a lot of damage, right?
Yes.
And I think that's the critical part that we as an industry, as AI practitioners in the end, need to control.
Yes.
So from coming back to implementing AI and implementation strategies, if you take a company and that company is getting started, I think most have gotten started now, but what is a good place to start?
Yes. So in my opinion, we have use cases with differing what we call a level of cognitive complexity. So we have use cases with quite a low level of complexity, and we have use cases with higher levels. And I always recommend to start with these low cognitive complexity use cases. So what are these? For example, translation and correction, translating a human text to other languages, or just changing the tone or the level of professional look and feel. Then also summarization is something that these models tend to be very strong. So consider the case where you have quite a long customer history, communication history, and then you have customer agents that need to understand the customer intent right away. So there, such summarizations can be very valuable. And last but not least, also content generation. So think about having a technical documentation about some issue, and now you have to communicate this in a digestible fashion to the users. Their language models can be quite helpful. And I think these kind of use cases are quite straightforward.
They are, yeah. And the risk of error is relatively limited.
Yes, agree. Yeah.
Cool. And so what are the, those are the low-hanging fruits. What are the higher hanging fruits that probably also, give you more savings at the end of the day?
Of course. I mean, I think that we shouldn't end there. We should be more ambitious. And what typically comes next are these question answering systems. So you have oftentimes quite complex technical domains, and then you try to answer questions, be it internal questions or then in the next step being customer questions automatically. And then ultimately, of course, also AI agents. So you try to automate a more complex workflows where your language models have access to internal tools and can execute a business task independently. And I mean, this is happening right now. So this is not visionary. It's just, in my opinion, more challenging. And when you think about it, what are the challenges? We currently discuss very much the term context engineering. So in the past we talked about prompt engineering. I think prompt engineering is not that interesting anymore. At least that's my opinion. Context engineering basically means how do you get the contextual relevant data and information to the language models. So it's very much, in my opinion, a retrieval data preprocessing challenge here. And then, as I said before, we have the classical challenges: data governance, security, securing data privacy, maybe also access control. And then one more thing that I think is quite important: feedback loops. I know you like the term loop as well. And we need to get learning into the systems. How do we improve the systems over time and continuously from the data and the experience that we produce? So this is something that I think is very much crucial.
Absolutely. That's actually how the name Inside Loop came to be. Yeah.
Yes.
Because of exactly that. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I couldn't agree more with you. Maybe coming back and switching gears a bit, we talked about the business cases and the use cases that we can that we can bring forward with AI. Coming back a bit to the story of your daughter, probably, human AI interaction. She didn't like it so much. She preferred the human-to-human interaction, especially for learning math. But what's your take on this, especially with all the different companies you worked with and the research angle into it? What's your take on human AI interaction? Where will it go? How should we look at it?
Yes, in my opinion, I think this is one of the most crucial parts going forward. What I still often see is what I call it all or nothing mentality. And by all or nothing mentality, I mean you think in terms of either a complete workflow automation or no workflow automation at all. It's kind of a black and white mentality. And we talked about hallucinations already. So the foundation models are designed in such a way that there is practically no way to reduce risk to 0%. You will always have 0.0001% risk, right? So you need to have processes to handle this. And I think there human AI interaction comes into play. On top of this, we need to handle what I call task specificity, meaning that the human involvement very much should differ depending on the complexity of the situative question or the situative risk involved, but also the urgency. So just a very simple example, if you think about your help desk, you probably don't have it 24/7. So when you think about nights, is it better to have simple answers, simple reactions overnight, or to no reactions at all? And so, you have to have this complex setup in mind when designing such systems.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's a bit, it's a bit a similar story than as autonomous driving. It almost sounds like, right? We do step by steps. We start with the simple use cases first, like driving straight or driving at the same speed. And once the AI is as good as the human at it, then we kind of put it into production. It seems like we're going a bit the same direction with a couple of caveats or improvements actually, because yeah, we can actually in off hours we can ask an AI to get the necessary context information on a new service case without necessarily solving it. Absolutely.
Yes, and it's very interesting that you mentioned autonomous driving, because my whole investment into human AI architectures is very much motivated by this domain, in the sense that in autonomous driving they have well-defined frameworks how to design these interactions in certain situations. And I'm very much convinced that we need these kind of approaches also when it comes to business applications.
So essentially reflecting on the criticality of what could go wrong if the AI makes a mistake, and then based on the level defining certain gates of adoption. Is that what you mean? Or
yeah, I mean, so what we did is we looked into our current practices. So we analyzed different customer service platforms, and we came up with what I call a typology of different human interaction modes. So at the level of lowest automation, we have what I call human augmented. So basically AI assists, human executes. So for example, giving you have a customer communication going on and you receive next best action. Right. Then next level, human in control, basically meaning AI suggests, human decides. So, on auto-generating personalized responses, and then the sales rep or the service rep can just decide to send it right away or adjust it.
Yeah.
Then next comes human in the loop. So human in the loop is used as the broad term. In my opinion, it says something very specific, in the sense of that you need to measure confidence. And in low confidence situation, you hand off to the human. In high confidence situations, you automate completely. So just a very simple example. You often have customer intent detection in these systems. And if the customer intent threshold is low, you may decide to hand over to a human. Whereas if the customer intent confidence score is high, you then go on with an automated handling. So that's human in the loop. And then we also, and this is more seldom, human on the loop. So you just have a human supervisor or monitor. And you watch aggregate statistics, for example, sentiment flags. And if you see that for some domain or even some specific interaction, something goes wrong, then you basically change the system, or you even interrupt automation in certain tasks.
So is that so? If you have, if we imagine like a email conversation between your AI-fied customer service and the end customer, and the end customer starts getting, you can sense in the tone they're annoyed, they're starting to use maybe bad words, things like that, and then you say, oh, stop it, we kind of need to put a human in the loop here.
That would be another use case for human in the loop, in the sense that it's just not, can also be the sentiment threshold, not only the confidence threshold. But yes, that's a very good example. Yeah. So now, I guess so I'm very much convinced by this topic, but I guess the question now is when to choose what, right?
Exactly.
And I think we should make this decision based on data as well. And so in my opinion, we can have with a kind of a framework where you on the one hand model business cost. For example, what we call the cost of false positive, meaning, what's the consequence of even generating false information? And then, of course, the cost of human work. So that's an important factor. Then also time metrics. How long does it take for a human operator to retrieve information, to generate information, or even just to check an AI draft? And the third corner, the third component are performance rates. What's the performance of retrieval, of generation, and not just of the automated system, but compared to the manual system. So this is what we need to model or measure. And then you can basically calculate the total cost per customer query, right? And this cost basically reflects, on the one hand, the potential money saved from automation against increased risk of AI errors.
Exactly, yeah.
And then you can think about a break-even point. So are you at a situation where economically it makes sense to move to the next level of automation?
Yeah, to take the risk or not effectively.
Correctly. So we use this framework at a manufacturer. They use basically very classical. You have customer questions about these machines, and quite complex technical machines. We get in the machine documentations and so on. Now, interestingly, in this use case, we found human in the loop to be by far the most cost effective, and basically at 50% of the cost of a fully automated or a human augmented scenario. And in terms of where should we invest next, in this situation, we could show that it makes much more sense to invest into improving retrieval or generation in comparison to, investing into larger auditing teams or making humans work on stuff.
Yeah, I'm with you. That mirrors a bit our perceptions as well. We invested a lot into having proofing agents behind that kind of, but still automatically check the answers, recheck them, do multiple retrievals based on what certainty do we need at the end in terms of the answer that the AI gives. So that makes a lot of sense. I like a bit the analogies. It feels like we're going from a supervised learning to a supervised inception in a way, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So looking at the time, I still have one or two questions left. Looking at the future, how do you see all this evolving? I mean, we're in a super fast-paced, environment where it feels like an inception point almost again in terms of technology.
Yes.
Inflection point, sorry, not inception point, inflection point. And so how do you see the collaboration evolving into the future?
Yes, I mean, I guess my main takeaway is we need to move away from these set it and forget it designs. All right, we shouldn't have a workflow design and be happy with it. We should think about how we can use the data from these systems to improve the systems. We should start with a lower level of automation, human augmented to human in control, and then move from there. Use these learning loops, and implement kind of a divide and conquer approach, where humans should basically handle exceptions, where AI handles the routines. So this is, I think, very crucial that we use this kind of management approaches when it comes to LLM-based systems.
Yeah. And how does that, what does it mean for corporate LLMs? How are they going to evolve in the future?
Yeah. So I see different areas of development here. I mean, I do know that agentic AI by now is almost a kind of a buzzword, but I think there's a lot of flesh to it. So workflow automation is something that there's so much potential in that. And so we will see this evolving more and more. Then the next thing, and I know that you're very much working on this, is specialized models integrated into vertical platforms and software products. So I think most software products will have LLM engine components in the future. Then, of course, also small models, on device, edge AI. You don't have to have these huge cloud-based, but you can have special purpose models. This opens up new areas. And then last but not least, right now, I'm very much fascinated by also just the use of these tools for service engineering and programming. It speeds you up so much. Vibe coding, you're just describing what you want. You can have at least quite fast prototypes, which you then can further develop. So I think this also opens up huge new opportunities.
On that note, huge opportunities. I'm with you. I think we're already above the time, but that was because we were drawn into a super interesting conversation of a super interesting topic. Thanks a lot, Jochen, for all your insights, for agreeing to share this here with us and our audience. I wish you a very nice day, and thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, JT. My pleasure.
Bye.